The poor maid thought her nightmare was over. 8 months of cruelty. 8 months of broken bowls and screaming and picking up shards from cold marble floors with burned hands. 8 months of crying alone in a dark kitchen at 2 a.m. holding a photograph of a farm she would eventually sell for a man who didn't deserve it. All of it was behind her now. Alexander had stood up. The wheelchair was against the wall collecting dust. The ring was on her finger. Her name was on the foundation door. The city knew who she was and what she had survived, and the story had a good ending. Isabella thought her nightmare was over. Then Sarah Mensah walked back into the city on a Tuesday morning with a dangerous smile and a plan she had been building for 90 days. She didn't come to apologize. She came to take everything back. Alexander knew Sarah had landed before her plane finished taxiing. His head of security sent the alert at 6 a.m. A single photograph taken at the international arrivals terminal. Sarah. 2 suitcases. A black car waiting. The specific, composed expression of a woman arriving with intention rather than impulse. Alexander looked at the photograph for a long time over his morning coffee. Then he called his lawyers. "Start pulling everything," he said quietly. Her movements since she left. Every lunch. Every contact. Every journalist she has spoken to in the last 3 months. He set down his cup. She didn't come back to apologize. Find me what she came back to do. He said nothing to Isabella. Not because he was hiding it. Because he needed to know the shape of what was coming before he put her in the path of it. He had made the mistake once before of watching from behind glass while Isabella walked unknowingly into danger. He would not make it again. This time he would watch from the front. He was ready when Sarah arrived at the foundation building 3 days later. His security team flagged her the moment she walked through the lobby doors. Alexander was already on his way down before Isabella's assistant knocked on her office door. He passed Isabella in the corridor and put one hand briefly on her arm. "I know," he said simply. "Let me handle the first minute." Isabella looked at him. Something moved in her warm brown eyes. Not relief exactly, but the specific recognition of a woman realizing she is no longer facing things alone. She nodded and stayed back. Alexander walked into the reception area alone. Sarah was standing at the front desk in a dress that cost more than Isabella's first 3 months of salary. Her rich, deep brown skin was flawless. Her sleek black hair fell perfectly to her collarbone. She turned when she heard his footsteps, and her dangerous smile arrived exactly as he had expected it to. "Alexander." His name in her mouth, like she still owned the right to say it that way. "You have 5 minutes," he said. "No greeting. No performance. Say what you came to say." She produced a folded document from her handbag. A request for reinstatement to the Foundation Advisory Board. 3 years of prior contribution. Her name on the early framework. She delivered the argument cleanly and professionally, and without once acknowledging that she had placed her engagement ring on his hospital bed and walked out before the sheets were cold. Alexander looked at the document without taking it. "You left," he said. Quietly. The way he said things that was simply true and needed no decoration. "When I had nothing, you decided you deserved better. And now that I have everything, you've decided you deserve a share of it." He handed the document back. "You don't." Sarah's dangerous smile transformed then into something colder and more honest than anything she had shown since arriving. "I hope we could do this gracefully," she said softly. She looked past him toward where Isabella had appeared silently in the corridor doorway. Small frame, chestnut hair twisted at her neck, warm brown eyes watching with absolute composure. Sarah's gaze moved to the ring on Isabella's left hand and stayed there for a long, deliberate moment. She seemed strong. That farm girl composure. A pause that carried everything it wasn't saying. "Let's see how long it holds." She left. The lobby was very quiet. Alexander turned to find Isabella already looking at him. Her expression was unreadable in the way it was always unreadable when she was processing something large and painful and refusing to let it show on her face in public. "She is not finished," Isabella said. "No," Alexander agreed. "She is just starting." He was right. Sarah moved the way she had always moved. Not loudly, not visibly, but through the right rooms with the right people and the right version of the right story. She had spent 3 years as Alexander Blackwood's fiancée. She knew which board members lunched where. She knew which journalists owed her favors. She knew the exact pressure points of her reputation and precisely where to press to make a crack become a fracture. By Friday morning, Isabella's photograph was in 4 separate publications. The stories were careful, legally careful. Nobody called her a gold digger directly. They simply asked questions. They juxtaposed the midnight farm sale with her current foundation salary. They found her maid's employment record and placed it beside her director title. They quoted unnamed sources expressing concern about the optics of a romantic relationship between a billionaire and a former member of his domestic staff. They were clinical about it. That made it worse. Isabella read the first article at her desk on Friday morning. She read it completely and carefully, the way she did everything, without rushing, without performing a reaction, taking the full measure of what she was dealing with. Then she closed her laptop and went to the bathroom and locked the door. She stood at the sink with both hands gripping the cold porcelain and looked at her own reflection. Her warm brown eyes looked back at her. Her face was composed. Her jaw was set. Her back was straight. And then, just for a moment, just in the private locked silence of a room where nobody could see and nobody could report and nobody could photograph, she let it happen. Her face crumpled. Her eyes filled. One hand came up to cover her mouth, and she stood there in the cold white bathroom light and felt the full weight of what was being done to her. The farm sale reframed as desperation. Her loyalty reframed as strategy. Every true and real and costly thing she had ever done for a man who had treated her badly turned into evidence of calculation by a woman who had never once stayed for anything difficult. She stood there for exactly 4 minutes. Then she turned on the cold tap, pressed her wet hands against her face, looked at her reflection one final time. She had survived worse than headlines in rooms without windows. She had survived broken bowls and screaming in 2 a.m. kitchens and selling the only home she ever had. She had survived being invisible her entire life, and she had survived being seen in the worst possible way, and she was still standing in both cases. She unlocked the bathroom door and walked back to her desk and opened her laptop and kept working. Nobody saw. Alexander saw. Not through a camera this time. He had been walking past the bathroom corridor when he heard the lock click. He had stood outside the closed door for 4 minutes without moving. When he heard the tap run, he walked away before she came out. He went back to his office and sat at his desk for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. "How much do we have?" he asked his lawyer. "Enough," the lawyer said. "The surveillance on her movements since she landed gave us the restaurant meetings. We have records of 7 separate lunches with board members and 4 with journalists. We have the timing correlation between those meetings and every story that ran this week. We have 2 sources willing to go on record." A pause. "We have enough to end it." "Monday," Alexander said. "Announce the press conference tonight." By Friday evening, 3 board members had requested an emergency meeting. By the time their request reached Alexander's desk, he had already anticipated it and scheduled it for Saturday morning, on his terms, in his boardroom, at a time of his choosing. They arrived Saturday looking like men who believed they were coming to deliver a verdict. They sat across the long glass table from Alexander and presented their concern with the careful language of men who had legal teams and knew how to say ugly things in clean sentences. The foundation's optics, the donor environment, the public perception challenge created by a romantic relationship between the director and the founding CEO. They never said Isabella's name once. They referred to her as the situation. Alexander let them finish. Then he opened a folder and slid 3 documents across the table simultaneously, 1 to each man. "Those are your personal communications with Sarah Mensah over the past 3 weeks," Alexander said. "Lunch meetings, email chains, 1 phone call each." He paused. "I also have the donor correspondence you coordinated through her, the timing of which lines up precisely with the withdrawal threat we received Friday evening." He looked at each man in turn, his storm gray eyes completely level. "You didn't call this meeting because you are concerned about the foundation. You called it because Sarah promised you something in exchange for removing Isabella. I want to know what it was." The boardroom was absolutely silent. None of the 3 men spoke. "You have until Monday morning," Alexander said. Standing. Resign quietly or I release everything publicly. Those are the only two options available to you. He closed his folder. This meeting is finished. They left without another word. Alexander called the major donor personally that afternoon. Not to beg, not to negotiate. He called to tell him exactly what had happened, who had coordinated the withdrawal threat, and what evidence existed to support it. The call lasted 11 minutes. The donor not only confirmed he was staying but asked what else he could do. Alexander told him to wait until Monday. Isabella found out about the board meeting from her assistant at 6 p.m. Friday, before Alexander had a chance to tell her himself. She sat with the information for 2 hours while the foundation officers emptied around her, and the city darkened outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 8 p.m. she was still at her desk. She opened her bottom drawer. She took out a small cardboard box. She placed it on the desk in front of her and looked at it for a long time without moving. Then she began. One file, then another. Her personal notebook with the handwritten notes from her first week. All the ideas she had arrived with, the communities she had identified, the problems she had mapped out in her small precise handwriting before she had a title or salary or anyone's permission to care this much. She picked up the small framed photograph from the corner of her desk. The farm, the red barn, the oak tree, the green fields. She held it in both hands and looked at it for a long time. She was not crying. She had already done that in a locked bathroom, and she would not do it again tonight. She was simply making a decision she believed was right, and doing it with the same quiet dignity she had brought to every difficult thing in her life. She placed the photograph in the box. She heard footsteps in the corridor. Alexander stopped in the office doorway. His eyes went to the box immediately, then to her hands, then to the empty corner of her desk where the photograph had been. He looked at her face and read everything in it the way he had learned to read her. The set of the jaw, the steadiness of the eyes, the particular quality of stillness that meant she was carrying something alone again. He crossed the office. He sat down in the chair across from her desk. Not beside her. Across from her. The way you sit when you are prepared to have a real conversation, rather than simply stopping one. Tell me, he said. Isabella looked at him. The foundation's largest donor almost withdrew because of me. 3 board members called an emergency meeting because of me. 4 publications ran stories questioning my integrity because of me. She kept her voice very level. The work we are doing is too important, Alexander. The communities we are trying to reach cannot wait while the press decides whether I deserve to be in this room. My leaving protects everything we built. You're leaving, Alexander said carefully. Reward Sarah for coming back. That is not more important than the wake. You are the work, he said. Your name is on every proposal that matters. Your thinking is in every initiative we have launched. You cannot separate yourself from this foundation and leave the foundation intact. It doesn't work that way. You can rebuild. I don't want to rebuild, he said. His voice was still quiet, but there was something underneath it that stopped her. I spent 8 months rebuilding. I am finished rebuilding things that didn't need to be broken in the first place. He leaned forward. I handled the board this morning. The donor is staying. The evidence against Sarah is complete. I have enough to end this on Monday. He held her gaze. I need you to trust me for 72 more hours. Isabella looked at him across the desk. You handled the board. Yes. This morning. Yes. And you didn't tell me. A beat of silence. I am telling you now. Alexander. Her voice carried something complicated. Exasperation and gratitude arriving at exactly the same moment. You cannot keep managing things on my behalf without telling me. I am not a maid anymore. I am your partner. That means you bring me the problems when they are still problems, not when you have already solved them. He held her gaze for a moment. Then something shifted in his expression. The specific look of a man recognizing a fair point delivered by someone who has earned the right to make it. You are right, he said simply. I am sorry. The honesty of it, immediate, undefended, without qualification, was more disarming than anything else he could have said. Isabella looked at the box on her desk, then at the empty corner where the photograph had been. She reached into the box. She took out the photograph of the farm and placed it back on the desk. 72 hours, she said. 72 hours, he confirmed. She looked at him. And then you tell me everything. Before you solve it. While it is still a problem. Yes. Every time. Every time, he said. And meant it. The press conference was announced at 9 p.m. Friday for 10 a.m. Monday. Alexander's lawyers contacted Sarah directly on Sunday morning. A courtesy call, they said. A professional notification that certain evidence would be presented publicly on Monday, and that she was welcome to attend or not as she chose. Sarah spent Sunday making calls, trying to find the gaps, trying to find the version of events that still had a door open somewhere. There was no door. She arrived Monday in Ivory anyway, not because she believed she could win, because Sarah Mensah had never in her life walked away from a room before she was asked to leave it. That was both her greatest quality and her most fatal flaw. She stood near the front with a dangerous smile and her perfect posture and her sleek black hair, and she waited to see what Monday looked like. Alexander walked in at 10 a.m. Isabella beside him in deep burgundy, chestnut hair loose, warm brown eyes clear and direct and looking at no one but him. Alexander did not begin with the foundation. He began with the truth. He laid it out completely. The coordinated campaign. The restaurant meetings, the planted stories, the board members and the donor correspondence, and the timing that connected everything back to a single source. He presented it the way he presented everything, without theater, without anger, with the quiet, devastating precision of a man who had spent 3 weeks building a case while his fiancée went to work every morning and read about herself in the papers and locked herself in bathrooms and came back out and kept going. He named Sarah once, just once. Directly, without cruelty but without softening it either. Sarah's ivory smile lasted 4 more seconds after her name was spoken. Then Alexander turned from the room entirely and looked only at Isabella. I have wanted to say something publicly since the day I put this ring on her finger, he said. His voice dropped from press conference to private. The cameras were still running, but the room somehow felt very small. Everything this woman has done she did quietly, in the dark, without asking for recognition or reward or even basic decency in return. He took her hand, raised it so the room could see his grandmother's ring. She is not a maid. She is not a gold digger. She is not a calculation or a scheme or a story. His storm gray eyes found her warm brown ones and stayed there. She is the woman who stayed when everyone else ran, who gave when everyone else took, who stood between me and men twice her size with nothing but her voice and her dignity. His voice was very quiet now, completely honest. The most powerful man in the city reduced to simply a man saying true things in front of witnesses. And she is going to be my wife. The room erupted. Isabella looked at him, one tear escaping without permission, her small capable hand squeezing his large one. You are completely impossible, she whispered. I know, he said, and smiled. The unguarded, unplanned smile that she had learned was the rarest and most real thing about him. Sarah left before the press conference ended. Not in defeat exactly. In the specific, dignified retreat of a woman who understood when a room had finished with her. She walked out through a side door before the applause had stopped. Her heels clicked in the empty corridor. The sound faded. The restaurant manager confirmed the meetings on record by Tuesday. 2 journalists issued corrections by Wednesday with the specific reluctant language of people doing something professionally necessary that personally cost them. The 3 board members submitted their resignations on Wednesday evening. Quiet, clean, without statement. The donor doubled his contribution Thursday morning and released a public endorsement of the foundation's leadership. It was not instant. It was not clean. The internet held the original stories longer than the corrections. Some people kept their opinion regardless of evidence because that is what some people do. Isabella's name would carry a residue of this for longer than was fair, and they both knew it. But the tide had turned. Visibly. Permanently. Isabella watched the news from the farm porch on Friday evening. Alexander sat beside her. The African sunset was burning the hills into amber and deep rose. The old oak tree caught the last light. The farm was completely quiet around them. the specific healing silence of land that has absorbed generations of human struggle and remained. She was tanning the ring on her finger slowly, feeling the weight of it, the permanence of something that had been chosen deliberately and defended publicly, and was now simply hers. She really believed she could come back and take it all, Isabella said quietly. She believed you were still the woman from the first day, Alexander replied. The one in the thin coat, carrying the battered suitcase. Isabella considered this. I am still that woman. I know. He looked at her, at the warm brown eyes and the loose chestnut hair and the capable hands and the specific unbreakable quality that no headline had ever touched and nothing ever would. That is exactly why she never had a chance. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to him with a small breaking smile that had cost something to give since the very first time he had seen it and said, Next time someone tries to take something from us, tell me while it is still a problem. Alexander looked at her, the storm gray eyes warm and open and completely without glass. Next time, he said, I promise. She leaned her head on his shoulder. The farm held them quietly in the last of the African light. The nightmare was over. This time it was actually over.